The first thing I did after waking up inside a fairy tale was smile, not because I was happy, or relieved, or experiencing some inspirational new life moment, but because I was standing exactly 3 feet away from the evil queen while she stared into her magic mirror, asking the most statistically lethal question in this entire universe. The kind of question that historically resulted in teenage girls being poisoned, exiled, or chased into the woods by men with knives and unresolved authority issues. So yes, I smiled sweetly, politely, professionally, with the kind of customer service smile you develop after years of pretending not to notice when someone is actively deciding whether or not to kill you because screaming wouldn't help, fainting wouldn't help, and asking where I was definitely wouldn't help when the room itself had already answered that question for me with black marble floors polished enough to reflect my panic, towering windows that let in plenty of light but absolutely zero warmth, and a woman in velvet staring at her reflection like it had personally betrayed her and still owed her an apology. And I didn't need a narrator to explain anything because I knew this story. Everyone did. This was Snow White, which meant mirrors talked. Beauty was a political weapon, and women died for being slightly younger, and then it hit me, not dramatically. Not with flashing lights, but quietly and horribly because I recognized the dress on my body. The pale hands that weren't mine. The way the servants wouldn't quite meet my eyes. And I realized with perfect clarity that I hadn't fallen into Snow White's story as a side character or an observer. I was Snow White, the girl whose name the mirror was about to say, which meant that when this sentence ended, it would be my breathing that stopped, and right on cue the mirror shimmered like it was loading a system update nobody had consented to, and the queen said calmly, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all?" And I held my breath as the mirror replied in that smooth, ancient, never-been-wrong-before voice, "You are fair, my queen." And for exactly half a second, my nervous system relaxed before it continued. "But Snow White is," which was when I clapped, loudly, sharply, aggressively out of place. The sound echoing through the chamber like I'd just slapped destiny across the face. And the queen turned toward me slowly, her gaze sharp enough to rearrange internal organs, asking who I was in a tone that suggested she already had several execution methods ranked in her head, and I curtsied perfectly, introduced myself as her loyal stepdaughter, grateful, obedient, emotionally devoted. While my internal monologue was absolutely feral because I knew exactly what usually came next: jealousy, paranoia, a murder plan involving fruit, and a man in the forest who needed therapy. But here's the thing about fairy tales that modern people understand instantly, and nobody inside them ever does. They operate on 2 extremely fragile assumptions. First, that nobody ever asks follow-up questions. And second, that nobody ever steals the obvious problem. And in this story, the obvious problem wasn't me, it wasn't youth, it wasn't beauty. It was the mirror, the literal talking object ranking women like a cursed algorithm with no ethics review. And while the queen returned to admiring herself, I studied it properly and realized it wasn't just glass, it listened, it judged. And worst of all, it answered honestly, which in any political system is basically a loaded weapon. And that's when I stopped thinking like a victim and started thinking like a product manager with nothing left to lose. Because insecure tyrants don't need enemies. They need reassurance. So I leaned into flattery with surgical precision, lowering my voice and saying, "My queen, has anyone ever told you that your beauty doesn't look accidental?" Watching her pause as I continued without mercy. "Not young, not smooth though those fade, but intentional. Like every feature on your face chose its place and stayed there out of loyalty." Her posture shifting, chin lifting slightly, shoulders settling like she'd been waiting years to hear the correct words. So I pressed harder. "Your skin isn't just flawless, it's disciplined. It looks like it's never once betrayed you." And honestly, that kind of consistency is rarer than youth. Stepping closer as if evaluating a priceless artifact. People praise softness, but softness fades. Authority doesn't, and you have the kind of beauty that doesn't ask to be admired, it commands it. The mirror flickering angrily beside us because it hated this. Hated that I wasn't comparing or ranking or feeding it data. Snow White? I added lightly, dismissively, as if I weren't talking about myself at all. She's pretty in the way spring flowers are pretty bright, fragile, forgettable. But you? Letting the pause stretch just long enough to feel deliberate. You're winter. You're the season that stays. Mirrors don't really admire youth. My queen, they admire permanence. And your beauty isn't something that competes. It's something that outlasts. And by then her attention had drifted away from the mirror entirely and settled on herself, her hands, her shoulders, the elegant geometry of her own silhouette, as if she were seeing herself not as a contestant, but as the standard. And I finished gently, fatally. The mirror only asks who is fairest. It never asks who is unforgettable. And that's a far rarer category. And she smiled. Not triumphantly, but warmly. The smile of someone who felt understood instead of threatened. And in that moment I knew I was no longer disposable, because I wasn't here to run or fight or beg for mercy. I was here to do something much simpler and far more effective. Something I finalized that night alone in my room, staring at a ceiling. That didn't belong to me. I was going to steal the mirror. Because once it was gone, there would be no rankings. No comparisons, no fairest of them all. And without that, the queen wouldn't know who to hate, and fairy tales without clear. Villains don't end neatly. They spiral, they glitch, and they become very interesting, very fast.